Thanks for joining us today. So today we're looking at general maths, exam analysis and tips. And if you were with us last week, we had looked at maths methods. So I've brought back Anna Weatherall and Sam Hodgson from our author teams. And just a reminder also that these slides can be downloaded after the webinar. I'll give you a link so that you can have a look at that. So you don't have to spend too much time writing things down or taking photos, but I mean, I'll leave it up to you. So we're the publishers. We're publishing a new series called Nelson Maths. And year 11 has already been published, and year 12 is being published in a couple of months. Actually, next month. That's soon now. It's already August, already towards the end of August. So we are published in general maths, maths methods, and essential maths. So as I said, we have Anna and Sam with us. So Anna works on both the general maths and the maths methods books. And I'll leave it for you to read about the background of all our author teams, but a lot of them have head teacher experience or marking experience and writing experience as well. I guess with Anna, she's worn a lot of hats, including writing maths exams for New South Wales for the HSC courses. And then we've got Lani and Tracy also working on the general maths books. And then we've got Sam Lachlan working on the maths methods book. And we've also got Stephen Swift, who originally wrote the Nelson Q Maths series. Well, now he's more of a consultant and overlooking all the work that the new team is doing. Also, we've got a Nelson Secondary YouTube channel. Last year, we did quite a lot of webinars on the new course and what's changed in the new syllabus. So you can go to our YouTube channel and have a look at those if you're interested. And then our recent webinars on 2 weeks ago, we did one on essential maths and looking at deep understanding and problem solving. And then last Thursday, we did maths methods, exam analysis and tips. So they're available on YouTube now for viewing as well. And we've also published for years 7 to 10, Nelson Maths. So you can see we've got this common cover design going all through 7 to 12. So we've got 2 levels of books for years 9 and 10 as well. So we've got an advanced version for each of those year levels. And then we've got 6 books for years covering years 11 and 12. So Sam's going to start off and tell you a little bit of more of a background behind Nelson Maths 11-12.
Thanks, Robert. Hello, everyone. It's good to see and be here again. It's been a really interesting process. I'm a first-time author of textbooks, so this has been a very, very interesting experience. It's definitely an experience that if you get a chance to do at some stage, I would suggest, because it really does help improve your teaching in the classroom, being able to explain things and write things and synthesize them to make them understandable for teachers and students across the whole spectrum of the subjects across Queensland. So we are a brand new author team. We are all Queensland teachers, and we have worked in Queensland schools in the very recent past. So as you saw from the author page before, some of us have also been marking the QCEE external exams as well. So we bring that vast amount of knowledge that comes from those external exams into our writing and our tips and hints and tricks that we have put into the book, and we'll talk about during today's session. The focus of this textbook has definitely been on getting students ready for that exam preparation. Not only are we dealing here with a 50% external exam at the end of year 12, but another 30% goes to the internal assessment items in year 12 as well. So we are very exam heavy in this particular subject, and same with methods and same with specialists as well. So that has been the primary focus of the writing of this textbook, using the science of learning theory and some of the concepts which have been brought in there, and we'll talk about how our book incorporates those as well. These textbooks have been strictly mapped to the new QCEE syllabuses. We are trying to stick as closely as we can to them. There's no extra stuff. There's not going to be material that is not going to be assessed in there. We are very much making sure that if it's accessible, it's in the book, no more, no less. These features are for the general and methods textbook. Essential is obviously a slightly different focus, and if you want to learn more about that one, then you can go and look at the recording of the Essential presentation from a couple of weeks ago. As I said, we've focused very heavily on looking at the past exams. We've got 5 years worth of past exams now, and we've been able to take all of those questions, multiple choice, simple familiar, complex unfamiliar, and incorporate those into not just the exercises themselves, but also into different aspects of the textbook that we have. Beyond that, we're keeping explanations short and sharp so that we are getting to the point, making sure that there are applications and problems which help to build upon the knowledge beyond just the rote learning and practicing, which has its value, but to really embed that knowledge, we've got problem solving questions in there and other contexts and applications which are really useful as well. Each chapter has an exam question analysis. We've taken a question from the external exam relevant to that chapter. We've gone into a little bit more detail about what the thinking should be behind that question, and then what does the solution to that look like. And as I said earlier, we've got plenty of people who have been marking exams for the externals. So we're taking what we learned from those over the past 5 years and putting those exam hacks, hints, tips, tricks, whatever you want to call it, into the textbook so that that is forefront in your mind as you're going through and learning, well, from the student's perspective and from a teacher's perspective, what that looks like as well. This is an example of one of the exercises. This is taken from chapter 7 on networks. You'll see that the textbook is broken up into 3 sections. We've got a recap section, which has some short 1-mark questions from the previous exercise to, make that link between what you've done in the past and what you're going to do in the next section. You've got a mastery section where you'll have some more short response questions, maybe some multiple choice questions in there as well, to help build up your students' confidence in what they're doing. And then the third and final section, is exam practice. So this is where we find exam style questions and we put those, there's plenty of them in there in each of the exercises for students to go through and practice. You will see, sorry, Robert, can you just go back for a moment? You will see that there are little tags in there in the different types of questions. So in the mastery section, you see a green box there, which links it to a specific worked example. So if students want to go back and have a look at that worked example to refamiliarize themselves with it, they can go through and do that. In the exam practice section, you'll see in orange and red there, we have put in flags for whether the question is considered complex familiar or whether the question is complex unfamiliar, so that while students are practicing it, if they want to make sure that they are trying some of those harder questions, they are very easily able to find those questions. Okay, thanks, Robert. One of the other tags that you'll find is that, as I said before, we have taken questions from external exam papers and we have incorporated those into the exercises here. So that grey box in the top left-hand corner there says that this is a question which has come from a QCEE paper. This comes from 2022, paper 1, and it is question 6. You'll see that in a whole bunch of other questions as you go through. If you move your eye to the bottom right-hand corner, you will see that we have incorporated the 2024 questions in there as well. So we've got 5 years worth of multiple choice, short response questions at simple familiar, complex unfamiliar level. And we've managed to get them as much of those questions as we can into the writing of these chapters. Anna, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, actually, I will, Robert, just go, if you could just go back, sorry, for the two things I'll point out. One, little tip that I would use with my students in the classroom is actually using those recap questions as a really short, sharp little moment in time in any exercise to actually get students to engage with those exam questions. And I know we've had a lot of talks as authors around the kind of advice that we give our students about how to approach problems, but also in terms of the amount of time that they would get to spend on these styles of questions. So, you know, it might be, you know, we generally say to our students about 90 seconds when you're engaging into a multiple choice question. Now that does mean that you're actually creating a little bit of extra space. So I would probably be saying to my kids, you've got 3 minutes, go, and let's talk about those questions. The other thing just to note on question 10 that we've shown there, the other questions that we've incorporated are the sample questions that we'll put out. So you've got all of the ones that have gone out as external exams, but we also here are the illustrations of what external exam questions are going to look like, so we'll incorporate those as well. So basically, as an author team across both of the books, we have mapped every single question across the 4 books, so year 11, year 12 in both maths methods and maths general, and made sure that they're actually appearing within or in between those covers of the book. And I think that students being able to engage and see those questions in real time as they're embracing that content can make the exam ultimately demystify it slightly, because they're seeing it all the time, every lesson. Yeah, so that would be my little add-on in there.
And I guess traditionally teachers used to wait till halfway through year 12 to expose students to these exams questions, whereas with our new series, we're exposing them from as early as year 11, but certainly from the beginning of year 12.
Exactly.
And I think the benefit of that is going to be that students are going to be seeing them. They're going to be seeing the level of difficulty they're going to be expected to know, not just for the external, but also for their internal exams as well.
So you'll also see commonality in the way we write them. So the wording of the QCEE is very much modelled within the wording of what we're doing. But moving on, did you want me to jump in now, Sam, and talk about multiple choice?
Yep, you can do that. Yep.
All right, awesome. So as I'm sure you know all our general teachers will know, is that our multiple choice in Maths General exists in paper 1, and there are 15 questions within that section that are dedicated to multiple choice. So when I was writing my sections of this textbook, one of the things that was really important for me was looking at what were we really good at, what were we less good at, and making sure that those learnings we incorporated into the styles of questions that we wrote, and how we also integrated our exam tips and tricks into the textbook. So what you can see on the screen in front of you is last year's exam paper, the top 3 multiple choice questions that we had. And I will acknowledge I was really, very impressed to sort of see that question 11 there and question 6, they're from our topic, or from unit 3. So our students did really well recalling information that they were taught earlier in the year. And then you've got the location and geometry question that occurs, a little bit later in the year, that they've performed quite well on. I think the other interesting thing that I got out of just looking at this was just how quickly we went from 90% of our students down to just 70% on that third question. That was our third best one. Go to the next screen. These are the questions that we were less good at. Now, basically, what my cuts was looking at under 50%, and then in general, as what were the top couple of questions. So here, our bottom questions, we got 25%, which now this I found interesting again, was in that same topic that we had the 2 top questions, we've also got one of our worst performing questions. And then we've also got that question 12, again, from that same topic. So we're doing really well in teaching part of that statistics, and at the same time then there is an area that is obviously confusing our students. Now when you look a little bit more broadly at that, this is what the distribution of percentages was across all of the questions in 2024. Now, why that was important to me as an author was going, what are the blockers within those questions where we've got a vast majority of students not understanding it? What is it? What's that key concept that we need to make sure we've surfaced within our content? And so I think that was a really interesting distribution there. And because I'm, like most of us maths teachers, a little bit of a nerd, I went the next step to go, well, how does that track more broadly across all of the external exam papers that we've got? So here I did reduce that the bottom questions down to under 40%. So you can actually see there that, I think we're doing a really good job as teachers in moving the number of students that can engage with multiple choice questions up. So going from 2021 there, where we had 6 questions that were under 40%, I think we deserve a great big pat on the back, that, in 2024 and 2023, we got it to two questions that were under that little threshold. The other thing there is looking at the questions above 80%. That to me is quite a logical ebbs and flows with the exam questions that were on there, and where the strength we've seen, like with time series, for example, and bivariate data, that there is definitely a nice strength in that area now for Queensland students. Now, moving on to the next bit, why is this actually important? Now, Sam pointed out before that on our multiple choice questions that are QCEE questions, there is actually that blue percentage that appeared. And that blue percentage is the number of students that got that question right. So my first tip is to actually use that percentage as a way to engage your students to think about, well, what are the distractors in that question? How is it that that question may have pushed people to selecting an incorrect response? So when we look at distractors, and having had experience down south in writing syllabuses that you can use in external exam systems, as well as writing external exams, marking, all of that. These are the 5 common types of distractors that we would have used. The first one being, computational slip. So that's a really easy one that you'll find in a lot of questions. If there is an easy way to muck up a calculation, the QCEE is probably going to put that as one of the distractors on there. Another really common error that occurs across MC multiple choice questions is actually misreading the question. And again, that is something that is often deliberately put in there, or the words are arranged in a way that might not deliberately push you there, but open you up to misinterpreting what's going on. Conceptual misunderstanding is quite straightforward. There are also overgeneralizations. Patterns is another way that we write questions to test a student's conceptual knowledge. And then the last really common one is students misremembering a formula. So the big thing here is that they need to understand and use that formula sheet, and they need to be able to use it well, because that is one of their most important tools from the very first day that they start grade 11, making sure that they understand everything that's on there and knowing where it is, and not having to look through and turn the pages lots to find it. So we've also made sure that all of our formulas in the exam, in the textbook, are exactly the same as the final version of the QCEE's most recent update to the formula sheet. So we don't use different terms, we use exactly what they've got in there, is exactly what you'll see in the book. So for example, here, if we look at, this was from 2023, question 6, these are so the correct answer here was B, and but as you can see, only 36% of our kids actually got it. So the very first A, option A, there it was a misinterpretation of the wording of the question and understanding, the number of terms versus years growth. And then your option C and option D there, we had that misunderstanding between what is an AP versus what's a GP, and then another, AP interpretation of the formula there for D. So what I would be doing with my students if I encountered this within our book is I'd be saying, well, right, the blue little dot tells me that only 36% of our students got that correct. Work out why each of these part answers either work or don't work, and tell me what was the trick that was woven into the words within that question. And if you can start to get your students to think like researchers or analysts of exam questions, it can make it really, really easy for them to start to whittle down the solutions without even necessarily doing a lot of maths. So that's the first question there. On our so now moving on, we've got our short response questions in Maths General. So we've got those 10 questions in section 2 of paper 1 worth approximately 42 marks. And then we've got our complex, familiar and unfamiliar in our paper 2, which is that 38 marks. So one of the other tips in our textbook that I recommend is actually looking at our, next slide, Robert, please, is our exam question analysis. Now, as an author team in Maths General, one of the things that we were very intentional with was making sure that all of our exam question analyses covered the breadth of types of problems that you will have, that students will have or potentially see in an external exam. So this one, for instance, is out of, I wrote the network area, the network chapters as part of my area of authorship, and I selected this problem because it showcased a really straightforward, simple, familiar question that a student needs to be able to look at, identify what they've got to do very quickly and answer it. So those should be, particularly those first two parts, nice, easy marks that students should be able to knock over. So what we've modeled there, and all of the exam question analysis have this format. They will identify what exam paper, external exam paper it comes off, but we will then highlight the key things that students should be drawing out as they read that question. And then what also they should start to think as they identify those key words. What does that start to say to them about how I might be able to solve this? So it's a really good thing to be getting your students to look at it and imagine that, almost when you're reading and you're thinking about the question, that potentially is your perusal time in going, I see this, I'm thinking that when I come back to this question, I know, booyah, where I'm going to go. Now, when we've created the work solutions for that, the tick marks that we put in there will replicate where the tick marks or the 1 mark on the marking guide indicates that the QCEE assigned marks. And we've put in bolder writing where it's specifically that's what the QCEE is expecting to see. And as we've sort of shown there, we've given a little bit of a narrative around how you might have come up with that, but the bold says all I needed to write for part B was number of edges equals 2. Now, that's not to say that if I didn't have the words number of edges equals 2 that I wouldn't get that mark, but there needs to be some kind of, we're trying to encourage students to communicate appropriately so that markers can see exactly what they're doing and how it's right. So we've got another example on the next page. Oh, sorry, going to, so we've created these questions, but a really cool resource that's attached to the textbook is actually video versions of the exam question analysis, and by the great Joel Speranza. Now, he again will model the way to engage with those problems and provides a different mode for a student or for you as a teacher to engage with that question and see the different way in which you'll enter it, solve it, and come out the other end. So that is an absolutely great resource that we've got attached to that. So there is a video for all of the exam question analyses that we've got. So this question was from 2022 and it was a complex unfamiliar one. So the idea here, showcasing to students that there are going to be questions where you've got a lot of marks up for grabs and you may not have very many words on that page, and you need to be able to understand what is that actually asking for you, what is it asking you to do. So this one, lovely networks problem, and we're looking at the minimal time. But the other key thing there is that last statement, which is evaluate the reasonableness of this belief. So we know that there is going to be questions exactly like this that students have to be able to engage with, but they need to not write War and Peace. They need to just simply go, this is reasonable because, or this is unreasonable because, blip. And usually you'll find from, and certainly this is from my analysis over the last, all of the exam papers that we've got here, you're really only getting 1 mark for that part of the question. And a lot of students waste an inordinately large amount of time explaining more than they have to. So that's my next big tip for you, is really getting students to understand, if we're asking for reasonableness, we just want a sentence or two highlighting what you found or what you haven't found.
And
so this is another,
sure that sorry, Anna, making sure that link back to the numbers that they've worked out is explicit in that explanation. Exactly. It has to be linking back to the maths. Yeah, exactly. And so this one's another fun one. It was the Hungarian algorithm. Now, I acknowledge here that our syllabus has had a slight change, and that we now can go up to 5 by 5 for the Hungarian algorithm. So really, what I would be, so we left this as a 3 by 3, but within the actual questions in the textbook, you will see that we have expanded up to that 5 by 5 maximum that could occur on the exam. And certainly I would be getting my students to go beyond and do up to that. There really is no necessity to go beyond. You're just getting them to perform repetitious calculations over and over. But here in this question again, we've highlighted the key parts of that question. So something when students see that they're using a Hungarian algorithm, I would be encouraging them to go, if the matrix is not given, to actually go into the question and find where they've put the number of categories that we've got, so they can work out what type of square matrix are we looking to either create, or in this case, we already know that it's a 3 by 3. Now something, because as I said, in a former life, I've written exam papers and things in another state, is to think about where can we go with what the syllabus tells us is acceptable. And something that we've put in there just as a potential area for extension is if we gave students a non-rectangular matrix. Now, dummy activities has actually been removed out of networks. However, you can put in dummy rows or columns to actually create your square matrices, or square matrix, sorry, and then solve the problem. Now, at the moment, that's not a type of question that they have put on an exam, but it would be very easy, as you will probably, if you go into the textbook, you'll see we've done a few of these where we will indicate to students, you may need to put an additional row or column in there in order to be able to perform the Hungarian algorithm. So we've got some, this is just where we've gone and thought, how could we be a little bit nifty and tricky if we were an exam writer in pushing that content to its extreme. So again, that's exactly the same as how we showed the last question, the reading, the thinking, and then showcasing the working. So now another cool bit that we've got in the textbooks is that, again, we want to make sure that our students are well prepped for the pressure that they will feel when they get into an external exam. So at the end of every chapter, you will see that there are 2 cumulative exams. These are 1/3 of the size of the real exam paper. And basically each of these little mini exams cover 50% of the content that, also 50% of them is the content of that chapter. And the other 50% comes from all of the previous chapters. So of course, the only exercise that's not true is chapter 1, because there is no free. So it is all
chapter 1. And the whole idea of this is making sure that we give students opportunity to keep circling back to that content. And in almost all of the cumulative exams, we have tried to use the QCEE questions. But you will see that there are, just like here in question 8, where we may have taken a question and had to modify it to fit within this particular smaller model. Alternatively, there are, I think on the next one, oh, sorry, just going through here before I show you on the next slide. The first one mirrors paper 1. So it is that simple, familiar, 1/3 of the size. It's a 30-minute exam paper with 2 minutes for your perusal time. And as you can see there, we've got the multiple choice as well as our short response questions. So then going to the next slide, we've got our cumulative exam number 2. And here we've got, again, 30 minutes. And you'll tend to see that there's between 2 to 4 problems will occur in the cumulative exams, but it just depends on which questions we've pieced together to assess that particular content. The other thing that you'll see is that some of the cumulative exams will have a little bit more scaffolding, but again, that's based on the questions that we've got. So there was a very deliberate and intentional way that we pieced together which questions would go within which exercise. And so, yeah, that's the illustration there with cumulative exam number 2.
Okay, so these cumulative exams are at the end of every chapter.
Yes.
So they replace the traditional chapter review exercises. So that means, yeah, you get a mini exam or 2 mini exams at the end of every chapter.
Exactly.
And they're designed to be 1/3 of the length, but still using that idea of trying to aim for about 1 mark every 90 seconds. So 30 minutes, we're probably looking here at around about 12 marks, seems about right there. So making sure that it's, as close as possible to be what the exam is going to actually look like, so that they can get used to that timing and be under that time pressure in something which is a little less stressful than what an actual exam is.
Okay.
Exactly. So I think, this slide's very much what we have talked about earlier. It's written by Queensland teachers who have taught, marked, or are very familiar with the syllabuses. We've got expertise across the gamut of skills that you need to have in terms of writing, marking, reviewing exam papers, as well as being content experts when it comes to actually teaching this material and instructional design. We've really held ourselves to an exceptionally high standard in terms of that mapping of the content from the syllabus directly into each of the chapters. And we'll show you a little bit later on some of those different mechanisms that we've used to ensure that we've covered every dot point, we've covered it in multiple different ways, and use learning theory, the science of learning, to actually enhance the experience that students get out of our book. We've used the same cognitive verbs as the QCEE. We haven't invented a new type of language or a new way of interpreting maths, because we want to reduce the cognitive load rather than increasing it by adding in a language or a format for the textbook that for example, I know, having come from a state down south, that there is a very different way that we would write questions in some of those states compared to how we would write it here. And whilst that might, the maths is the same, the expectation in what a student should be able to produce out of that type of question is different here in Queensland in comparison to some of those states. So I think that's a really special thing to know. It's Queenslanders, it's for Queenslanders by Queenslanders. And the other really cool thing that I know we're going to talk about later, we've also tried to make sure that when students are in that textbook, they see themselves in the places and the way in which we've formulated problems. So, for example, we've got in our statistics chapter, we've got questions where we're looking at the number of cars that RACQ is going and servicing and things like that. We're talking about suburbs and towns here in Queensland. You know, there might be some healthy rivalry when we've used different sporting teams between Queenslander versus not Queenslanders. But again, it's all done through that idea of creating some fun and some ownership and students being able to see themselves in the content that we're actually teaching. And teachers, just little thing for you, you know, check out, there's some other little, I would call them, what do they call them in the gaming world, little Easter eggs in there in terms of naming and stuff like that we've put in there just to see if we can get a smile on your face as well. All right, so then Sam, did you want to talk through the general structure?
I think probably the biggest thing that we want to focus on here is that Unit 1 and Unit 2, we've got 6 chapters each in here, but in Year 12, we have been explicit. 1 chapter to line up with each of the 5 dot points that appears in the syllabus document. So it's very clear that if you want to do this dot point, you do this chapter, so on and so forth. If we go on to a couple of slides further down, there's a syllabus grid, which shows the link from where the individual chapters link to. So you'll be able to see that, and that's part of the front end of the textbook. So that planning side of things from the teacher's perspective, you can take that out of your hands, and it's been done for you by us. As Anna mentioned, there's lots of questions there with links to Queensland, different areas of talking about different cities. I know in questions I wrote, I made sure to not just focus solely on Brisbane, but make sure we go out into the regions to make sure that we're including everyone. As you can see in that worked example there, in highlighted in green and bolded, we've got those cognitive verbs. Now they will only appear in those worked examples. They don't appear in the questions, because they don't appear in the questions on the external exam or in the or on the internal exam. So we've put those in there to make sure that students go, okay, this is what a represent question looks like, or this is what a determine question looks like. Next one, Robert. This is the beginning of each of our chapters. First page there, nice, very brief outline of what's going to appear there. Over on the second page, you will see the syllabus coverage there, and we've copied and pasted that from the most up-to-date version of that from the QCEE. And that has sort of been, as an author, that has been my checklist. Have I been able to do all of these things? Can I say hand on heart that I have explained how all of these things work? Are there questions which assess that in the exercises at the end? So we have made sure that we cover all of those dot points, but we're not going too much beyond that because we want to stay focused on what is accessible on that external exam and on those internal exams as well. You'll also see
Sorry, Sam, I'll just interject with one thing in there. If you go just back to the last slide, Robert, you'll see one of the dot points there in the planar graphs, paths and cycles. I think it's the 5th dot point down. It says that, students need to find shortest path between 2 vertices by trial and error methods only. Another really unique feature of our book is that we all love maths. It is an area that is near and dear to our heart. But one of the things that we have I have noticed that some other books don't necessarily do is if the syllabus says you are just to do this, then that's what we are showing students. We will illustrate that, you can certainly test that method by using another algorithm, but that's what we're modeling. This is the expectation, again, to make sure that students have a very clear understanding that that's as far as they're required to go. So I know, for instance, that particular dot point in 2 other states is not just by inspection. And if you don't pick up that the Queensland version is just by inspection, then you could be getting your students to stress about things that they don't need to do in that exam. So yeah, on there, go on, Sam.
Sorry, Robert, if you could just go back one once again, sorry. The last couple of things on that second page, in that bluey purpley box that you see there, those show the extra documents which are available through Nelson MindTap. There'll be some slides at the end where we can talk about what MindTap can offer for your students in terms of digital access and digital extras which you can have there, but there's a list for the digital extras which are available for this particular chapter. Finally, at the bottom of the page there, you've also got a list of terminology. So we've tried to cap those at about 24, I think was the number.
24.
24, yeah. We've tried as best. Some chapters were just horrible, and I know I had one which had 26, and I was like, I'm going to get in trouble.
I can even say this particular chapter 7, was one that it was very hard to whittle it down to the words that were there, because there were lots of words that were very important.
And those words will appear throughout. Again, we've held ourselves accountable and make sure that those words are very clearly outlined and defined within the chapter. They appear as bolded and in blue, so that you can see that they're crucial words that you need to know. You will also find those in the glossary at the end of the book, and we'll talk about the glossary a little bit later on. As I mentioned before, there's that syllabus reference grid. So the dot points and the sub dot points that we see there, they're very explicitly linked. That's in the front of the book, so you can have that, and you can put this in any order that you'd like, whatever order best suits your students. But you don't have to be jumping from one chapter to the next, going, I've got to do this part from chapter 3 and this part from chapter 7 to cover this dot point here. We've taken care of that and made sure that it's as easy and free-flowing as possible, so that if you want to go 1 to 10 in terms of your chapters, you could very easily do that. Okay. One of the things that I, having taught in my school for a long period of time, we've seen research on different ways of working, different things which, different strategies which work best for students. One of the things that my school picked up about 4 or 5 years ago was this idea of the science of learning. And that was always going to be part of what my writing for my chapters in the methods textbook was going to be anyway. So it was useful to see that in the updated syllabus, the QCEE has stressed that these are important strategies for students to understand, and they've actually explicitly referenced them in the syllabus documents there, and that's that screenshot that you can see at the bottom there. We're not covering all 6 of the science of learning strategies that are here, but we've picked the 3 which are the most common ones that we're probably going to end up using in maths. One of the other ones, concrete examples, we do concrete examples. It's part of second nature in terms of what we do. So the 3 that we're focusing on are the spacing effect, the retrieval effect, and interleaving. So I'll very quickly just give you a definition of what all of these 3 are. The spacing effect, the idea of leaving gaps between learning concepts from the same topic, essentially saying to kids, hey, don't go and practice this for 5 hours in one go. Firstly, doing 5 hours of maths in a row is going to hurt your brain, and you're going to probably fry yourself a little bit. But also the idea of coming back and forcing your brain to remember in multiple instances of time really helps students to be able to pick up that knowledge at any point in time. And we understand that while the external exam covers units 3 and 4, units 1 and 2 are considered assumed knowledge. So they are potentially going to have to pick up material from up to 2 years ago when they sit that external exam. And as long as they keep practicing little by little, they'll make those connections in their brain just that little bit easier, help with that long-term memory side of things, so that when they get to an exam, they'll go, oh yeah, I remember that because I've practiced that a million times. Closely linked with the spacing effect is the retrieval effect. And that's the second one that we see here. And the idea of the retrieval effect is that putting yourself under regular test-like situations. Now, obviously, we're trying to keep the stakes of these rather low so that students don't get stressed out and they get exam phobia. But, short exams, short little practice drills where they are, again, forcing their brain to retrieve that information, build those pathways to rely upon their brain to be able to pick up that knowledge. And that final dot point there is absolutely 100% true from my experience. The more the struggle, the more the learning will stick. They've got to use their brain to think about it. They've got to dig their own way out of the pit that they've put themselves in. And they mightn't get it the first time around, but if they space it out and they keep doing these retrieval tests, retrieval quizzes, whatever you want to call them, every 2 weeks, every 3-4 weeks, whatever, they'll get better and better over time. The third and final one that we're going to be looking at here is what we call interleaving. And the idea of interleaving is, instead of covering one sort of topic at a time and just going, I'm doing all of that and then moving on to the next one, being able to interleave or look at topics, related topics at least anyway, in a slightly different order. And the big reason for this is we know that when we write exams for students, it's not always going to be the case that one question flows nicely onto the next one in terms of the content. We mix the questions up in terms of the topics that they do. So we know that they're going to face that when it comes to the exam. We should make them face that when it comes to their practice of this as well. And part of the reason that we've focused on these three is because there is a certain aspect of the writing that we can take the thought of having to do these things away from the teacher, not necessarily away from the teacher, but one less thing to stress about. We've incorporated these three strategies into our writing of each of the chapters, and that's there's a list of where all of those appear in our textbook on the next slides. There we go. Obviously, as a teacher, you've still got full control. You can do a spacing activity on your own. You can create your own retrieval quiz or retrieval test that you might want to do. You may have another resource where you can have that created for you. But we've consciously decided that, we're going to try and take a little bit of that load away from the teacher, reduce the stress, reduce the red tape a little bit, so that students still get the benefit of these strategies, and they are absolutely brilliant strategies. Students get the benefit of them, but you don't have to do anything for it besides just use the textbook as the resource that you would always be using it as. Anna, is there anything you wanted to add into that?
No, I think you've done that really, really well, Sam. I guess the really important part is that, as Sam said, you don't have to think about that. We've embedded all of those things within the way in which we've constructed the textbook and each of the chapters. We've been very made sure that our explanations are clear, that we've removed all of the extra sort of fuzz that sometimes is included in things just because, and really gone, this is what you need to know. So, for example, I can think of like, say, standard deviation. I have been in many a classroom where I've seen teachers doing that lovely great big table version of how you teach standard deviation and doing all of the calculations and things like that. Whereas again, we've gone, the syllabus is asking us to do this, and to use our calculators, so therefore that's how we're going to teach our students to do it. But we're going to then focus on, if we can use technology to solve something, then we're going to need to make sure that we support the additional demands that are then there about understanding how you interpret that and how that can be applied within a question. And one of those things that's really important then is also making sure that the level of our reading in there is appropriate to our students, but also to what their expectations are in the exam. We have decluttered the content, and we have chunked it to reduce that cognitive load. Again, to make sure that, if you're using this book with students, or if students are using it, that it optimizes or ensures that there should be productivity. Should, if they're doing it right, and if they really want to learn, all of those things. We've used lots of diagrams, infographics, things like that to, again, support our visual learners, as well as, ensuring that there are multiple ways to engage with the content. So this is an illustration, again, from one of the networks chapters. So Sam spoke just before about those terminology words. You can see there that complete graph is in blue. and that's because it's one of the terms that at the beginning of the chapter is identified as being key concepts that you need to know, or key terms. We've got diagrams there that are very simple, highlighting particular concepts if that's relevant. We've used summary boxes, so wherever there is important content, that will appear within those boxes, again in a very simplistic way, a very succinct way. We've got our worked examples where we highlight those cognitive verbs, and we will show you, illustrate to students, here are the things that you need to be thinking about, and there's the actual working that accompanies that. As you can see in worked example 16 there, one of the things that actually appears mid-question is an exam hack. Exam hacks will sometimes appear within questions, but they will sometimes then appear within the actual content itself. And these are hacks that have come from writers, markers, from people that, we know that this is something that students may not necessarily realise. So I know very early on, we have, advice to students about, the number of decimal places that you include in a question because you notice this. So those will highlight valuable exam things to be aware of, hints or common errors. We also will, within some questions, we will put an actual hint itself, as you can see there in the orange box under the exam hack. Something that we've noticed that students have done in our years of marking experience is that students will think they have to backtrack, like in that particular question. Don't do more than what you're asked to do. So we've called out things like that again, just to sort of say to students, it's okay. Make sure your answer's right, but you don't have to, you're not going to get anything more by going the other way. We've got clear and concise definitions. All of the important content that was in those summary boxes, we will pull that out as well as other vital sort of information, and that will appear in our chapter summaries at the end of each chapter. And as we mentioned, we've got things like infographics and flow diagrams if it helps students to digest that, because we understand very clearly that we're at the tail end of our Gen Zers, and we're about to embark on our new Generation Alpha students coming into our classroom. So we've looked at all of our generational knowledge that we've got from our futurists around how these learners are being shaped by their lived experience, and tried to impart that into the textbook there. We've also got in each of our chapters an investigation. So this is just an opportunity if you want to explore that content in action. And it is not something that you need to do, but it provides you with a nice little springboard into an activity that may engage students in a way that's slightly outside of the normal material that you would do. We've got, as I said, those we've got our worked examples. We also have our technology. So we know that there are 3 common calculators that are used across most schools in Queensland, being our Casio, our Sharp and our TIs. And so we have designed specific technology activities using those devices, as well as using spreadsheets and alternate technology that students may or should have access to through the learning process. Where we have calculator illustrations, we've gone down to that level of showing you how do you actually enter this into the calculator to assist our students. We've also got those types of instructions will appear in some of our worked examples as well, particularly when it's things like correlation coefficients and things like that, that students have to do it. It's a requirement of them in the exam. And now on the last bit here, at the beginning of the book, we have also put a list of mathematical verbs. So we acknowledge that in our wonderful subject, we don't just use the verbs that the QCEE says to use. We do have 1 or 2 other words that like, isolate, things like that, or convert, these terms that are part and parcel with our content area. So we've made it very clear that this is what this means within our context. We have used national and international benchmarks to make sure that we're not defining something that's not defined. They are common words. But then in the glossary, we've then got all of the words, the important terms that students may want to find a definition of or be interested where it occurs in the textbook. So you'll notice there that we've got the page listed for each of those terms. Sometimes there will be multiple pages listed, and where that actually happens is because there may be a couple of points. So I know, for example, in my in the networks topics, that there are a couple of terms that appear across those chapters, but have slightly same but different. So for example, if you're looking at adjacency matrices, we look at that in one of our earlier chapters, I think it's chapter 7, and then we look at it again in chapter 9. And so you need to know that there are 2 distinct points that content is in. Where we don't necessarily put multiple pages, like column percentages there, we've actually then highlighted other words that you may wish to look up if you're looking at that particular glossary term that might be of assistance or give you added information around that term that's worthwhile. So all of those blue terms I can 100% hand on heart say, appear in a terminology list somewhere. Now, Robert, would you like to step in here and talk about this?
Yeah, we've been talking, we have been alluding to the Nelson Mindtap website or online platform, which has all the extra resources. So things like videos, worksheets, the ebook, also the chapter PDF. I guess it's important to note that these resources are only available to schools who adopt the series. So you do need to buy a class set or book list the series, because you do need to register your classes and your students to use Mindtap. So you won't get access to these resources if you just buy a single copy or a teacher copy. So at the front of every chapter, there is this blue box that tells you exactly all the resources that are related to that chapter. For teachers, we have a topic test for each chapter. We've got teaching plans. We've also got work solutions to every exercise, which is on the teacher website, but it can be switched on for students. So we've got, and we've also got a test generator. I'm going to bring on David Truman now, who you may know. Actually, I'll go to this slide first. So your Nelson Learning Consultants are Amanda Cunnington and David Truman. One of them is attached to your school, so you may already know them. And David's going to just give you some quick information about pricing and availability.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. So I'm David. I cover the south side of Brisbane, the Gold Coast, and some regional areas of Queensland. On the north side, Amanda's got that territory, as well as the Sunshine Coast, and she's also got some areas of regional Queensland. So in terms of availability, our Units 1 and 2 book are published and ready to go right now. It's on Nelson Mindtap, and I'm sure some of you are enjoying that already. Units 3 and 4, depending on when you're watching this, is just around the corner for us at the moment. We're really only a few weeks away from it being fully published and also available on Nelson Mindtap. So you can see there that it's going to be ready to go in September. If you happen to have placed an order already, please get in contact with myself or Amanda so that we can set you up with Nelson Mindtap access. On there are a bunch of brilliant resources that we've touched on already so far today. And most importantly, you've got all of your teaching plans, solutions, and a whole bunch of those additional resources. So it really is worth having. So if you don't have access to that already, if you've just got a PDF, there's a lot more to get from that one. So please reach out to us. We can help you with those steps. If you'd like to see some previews of the Unit 3 and 4 book, we have digital page proofs available that we can send you. We do have a couple of physical copies, but again, depending on when you're watching this, publication for the real thing is just around the corner. So really exciting times. Thank you very much, Sam and Anna. It was awesome to listen to you as always. But yeah, if you, the listener, are excited to have a look at these resources, please reach out to me or Amanda and we can help you. I'll hand over to Susanna. Thanks.
I'll just jump in and say, because we are up to the last slide. So if you are interested in downloading this PowerPoint, you can go to that tinyurl.com web address. And you can also write to me if you've got any further questions regarding the maths, or you can write to the Nelson Secondary email for more general information. There's also our cengage.com.au website there where you can find out more about Nelson QCE maths.